All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I have a very special guest, Jeff Winter. I've known Jeff for a couple years now, and I've watched him just skyrocket in his influence on LinkedIn. He has 110,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is no easy feat. And he posts awesome content about Industry 4.0, and he's a thought leader in the Industry 4.0 space. But he's also a very savvy marketer. He really understands personal branding and how to create content that positions you as a thought leader, positions you as a person of influence, but also gets you traction. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me for the show.
Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I want to kick it off with just good people listening to this episode. They're on LinkedIn. Let's just say that they are an expert in their field. They're decent at what they do. Should they create a personal brand?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. And we'll get into kind of why on that. In fact, there was a Forbes article that came out this year, which I found fascinating, that says why managing your personal brand is now a part of managing your career. And I would agree that it's now becoming one of the most important aspects of your long-term career, is making sure that you have a clearly articulated personal brand to the world. So the short answer is yes. Everyone already has a brand. It's just, are you aware of what your brand is? And are you properly promoting it to the right people?
Yeah, I love that. And before we started, well, actually, just real quick, we do have some people live. So if you're watching this live, leave us a comment. Let us know where you're joining us from. Love to hear where you're joining us from. And if you have any questions for Jeff, if there's like that burning question that you want to ask a LinkedIn influencer, then go ahead and put that in there. And Jeff is great at being able to answer questions on the fly. So send them on over, and we'll incorporate those into our show today. But something that you talked about that I thought was pretty interesting is, you said, hey, look, you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. Your personal brand is ultimately your online representation, or not even necessarily online, but it's the way that people perceive you online and offline in your career. And so then ultimately it's not, should you create a personal brand? You already have one, but the idea is, how intentional are you going to be about how you show up? How do you want people to think about you? And you broke it down into different categories of your personal brand. So could you dig a little bit deeper into that?
Sure. And yes, everyone already has a personal brand. And let's talk about before COVID. When you looked at it like that, a lot of people just met people in person. And so their personal brand, whether it was through coworkers inside of office buildings and who they met, or through customers, or anyone that you interacted with in the world, you developed a personal brand. People formed opinions about you and what to expect based off that. Once the pandemic happened, it forced everyone to be online. And so now you had a digital personal brand. And that's what really took off the past few years is, are you taking your personal brand, your existing brand, and are you converting it effectively digitally to the world to be aware of? Because for a large portion of time, the way that we networked and internally in our organization, externally with people, was all digitally. And that's kind of part of my journey, is that profound moment of going, wow, whoever figures out how to properly capture and convey their digital brand is going to win in the world because of the pandemic. And so that was why my journey started in January of 2021, when I made a very concerted effort to go, I need to refine, codify, and very clearly come up with what my personal brand is, and then leverage digital tools out there to promote it to the world so I can control it. And it worked very well and completely changed my life personally and professionally. Now, to answer your question, when I kind of go over the personal branding, there's three main aspects I encourage everyone to have answers for as part of their personal brand. They're simple questions, but they're going to be quite challenging to come up with answers for. The first question is, what do you want to be known for knowing? The subjects that you know very well. What do you want someone to call you up and go, you know who knows the answer to this question? Jeff knows the answer to this question. That is the subjects you want to be known for knowing. The second is, what skills do you want to be known for being good at? That's different than the subjects you know. This is what do you want someone to call you for and go, you know who's really good at that? Jeff is really good at that. So let me give you just a little difference between those two. A subject I know very well, for example, could be stats and trends on Industry 4.0. A skill I have could be public speaking. It could be message creation. So people will call me for, hey, Jeff, you might know a stat specifically on AI adoption rates in pharmaceutical manufacturing. That's something I want to be known for knowing, and I want people to call me for. But I have other people call me and go, I need to come up with a go-to-market strategy. Doesn't have anything to do with Industry 4.0. I just know you're good at that skill. So knowledge, skills, and third is your personality. How do you want people to describe you in, let's say, 3 words? What adjectives do you want to use to describe you? I go out of my way to have one of mine be fun, which is why I dress up in costumes and have comedic posts some of the times, and others professional, which is why I take professional videos and spend a lot of time on the professionalism. The third is approachable that I have, which is why I want people to feel like they can reach me at any time. And so I spend effort making sure that that's conveyed and that people feel that way. One of the pieces of advice I give everyone is you have those already. It's just, are you aware of what they are? When I started this journey, I went around and asked my coworkers, even customers, and people I knew closely at a professional level, not personal level, and go, what do you think I know? What do you think I'm good at? Describe me in a couple words. I guarantee you'll find out some of those that you didn't know, and you'll find some that you either like or dislike. And so then you can choose to either reinforce it or to go out of your way to actively change it. And I went out of my way to actively change one of mine because how I was perceived as one of the skills, which actually happened to be on selling, I didn't want that to be part of my brand. It's not that I didn't want to be known as good or bad at selling. I didn't want to be the top thing that people thought of. So I went out of my way to change one of my skills to not be selling, at least perceived as to what people had.
Yeah, that's a great, a lot we could unpack there. One thing I want to dive into though, that's, I don't want to say totally unique to you, but I feel like in the, especially engineering, Industry 4.0, that world is not typically known as fun. You've got nerdy people, and I was, we met when I was in the engineering software space and interacted with a ton of people. And very rarely would I use the adjective fun to describe anything around there. No, it's cool, interesting, it changes the world, all these things that people think about with engineering, but fun isn't usually one. And you do a great job at that. I mean, you dress in a Batman outfit and you and your son build Batman Lego sets, or, building the Titanic out of Lego, or also your au pair videos, when you guys have brought in an au pair, and, those are all really fun. So for one, what led you to want to make that one of the things you're known for? And two, when you started out doing that, were you afraid at all that could negatively impact people's perception of your expertise on something like Industry 4.0 if they're not taking you as seriously?
So it's a good question. So you have to remember where I'm at now, roughly 3.5 years or so into the journey. What advice I give now isn't what I sat down day one, January 1st, 2021, and go, all right, here's my strategy, here's my structure, here's my tactics, here's how I'm going to do all this. No, it took me years to figure that out. And each year I posted my learnings in terms of, hey, here's the strategy I used, here's some advice, here's tips and tricks, and it's gotten bigger and refined over time. So I just released one at the beginning of this year that kind of went over that exact same thing. So it took me probably 6 to 9 months before I even had a handle on what I was doing, let alone codified it enough to articulate it to other people. Now, to answer your question about specifically the aspect of fun, here's part of why that came about for me. So when I look at the brand, or anyone looks at a brand that they want to convey, if you decide to want to be a thought leader as part of that brand, you don't want it to be only about the things you know and the opinions you have, just from a knowledge and skills perspective, because part of what makes social media so attractive overall is the social aspect. People want to get to know Jeff, not what Jeff knows. I mean, they want to know that, but they want to know both. So if you only posted all day, in my case, Industry 4.0, all day, every day, and that's it, they don't get to know like and appreciate me as a person. It's just my subject. So I made kind of a general rule over time to go, I want 80% of what I post about to be about my subjects and 20% to be about Jeff, so that people get to know who I am as a person. Yes, I include all different aspects of me personally for that. Now, what took some refining and trial and error is, well, what do I include in that? Do I talk about what's going on in my personal life, my kids? What do I talk about in that? And I've refined that over time to make it so that that personal aspect still supports my brand, which is what I want to show. So I only talk about things that support my brand. I don't talk about just anything going on in my life. I talk about aspects that I want people to know about me personally. And if you do know me at a personal level, fun is one of the things I love. I love April Fool's Day. I love, practical jokes. The show Impractical Jokers is my favorite show out there. So I wanted that to be conveyed in everything I do, because for me to work for a company, I want them to embrace that. For me to work with a client, I want them to embrace that. That's one of the things that we like about Jeff. It's just his personality.
Yeah, I think that's a really important and salient point, because especially, my audience at this point tends to be more small business owners that are trying to grow their business, consultants, agency owners, people like that. And I feel like a lot of the advice around personal branding is primarily focused on expertise and be an expert and, be shown as an expert. What I found when it comes to actually selling is people buy from people they, as Bob Burg would say, know, like, and trust. And so you can build up a lot of expertise, and people could even think that you're the best at what you do. But if they don't trust that you have their best interest in mind, and if they don't feel like they can trust you as a person, they're so much less likely to work with you. And so you'll find people who have strong relationships and they're not as good at a skill, and they outsell the person who's actually the true expert in the space. And so the personal aspect, I think, is really important as you're developing a personal brand, because people want to work with people they know. They want to have that feeling of familiarity. And it's amazing how effectively you can create that online. And so, I have it happen consistently where people get on a Google Meet with me and they go, "Oh, it's your background from your lives. It's crazy to actually they feel like it's special that they're in a one-on-one conversation, and it looks like it does when I'm on a live." Or they meet me in person and they're like, "Oh, you look exactly the same, or you sound the same in person as you do on LinkedIn." And so I think it's important, in the same breath that we talked about, hey, you want to make sure that the aspects you want to come across are. So it's not that you're putting just anything out there, you're being intentional, but allowing your personality to come through. And that's even more true if you sell or you go to speak at in-person events or things like that. Because when you meet someone in person, you want them to feel like it's the same as when you're online. And if there's a huge discrepancy, then there's going to be trust that's broken at that point.
Good point. I agree.
So yeah, maybe you could dig a little bit more. You talked about your journey, but maybe you could break down for us a little bit of what you would recommend. And in fact, I posted a link in the show to your personal brand document that you posted, and you talked about the daily routine for novices. So maybe you could lay out a little bit of, when you're in that 0 to like 20,000 follower range, what your recommendations would be for people to grow, and then what you saw happen as you kind of crossed that line in your journey since then.
Sure. So before I answer that, I want to kind of give a little bit of information before you start getting into the posting and the daily routine for it. So one of the things that I recommend that people generally need to decide is how they want to be perceived as part of their personal brand. I broke it down into a few different categories that you can be if you're going to be doing this. One is a thought leader. One is a subject matter expert, one is an evangelist, and one is an influencer. And I really view it as the thought leader is all of those combined. And so you need to decide, because being an influencer is different than an evangelist, which is different than a subject matter expert, which is different than all of them, is how I'm labeling as a thought leader. The way I describe is not everyone needs to be a thought leader. And in that guide, I post all the requirements for like what, constitutes a thought leader. But the big, bold statement I give is everyone out there needs to be a subject matter expert. They need to be perceived as knowledgeable on something. Let's say you're just an average salesperson. You can pick your subject in that case to be selling, sales management. I know sales really well. And or it could be the thing you're selling. It doesn't matter what it is. You need to have an area of expertise that you convey as part of your personal brand. So at a minimum, everyone needs to be a subject matter expert. That subject matter expert is more reactionary. Think of the thought leader as proactively pushing everything to the world. So if you want to be a thought leader, you need to be promoting your thoughts and ideas all the time. If you want to be a subject matter expert, you don't need to be proactively pushing them all the time, but you need to still look very credible on your subjects when people look you up or when you engage with them. So you can be more reactionary with it. Think of this as updating your profile on LinkedIn to make sure that when someone looks you up, you convey the brand that you want and the expertise that you want. Remember those 3 areas that you have, your knowledge, your skills, and your personality, that you're conveying that. So we kind of start with that. So when we get into the LinkedIn side, which you're jumping right into the daily routine of the LinkedIn.
Wait here, Jeff, let me do this. Somebody asked a question, and I think you could put this exact answer you're about to give into the context of their question. So I'm going to put it on the screen. It's kind of a longer question here, but the basic idea is, what's the advice for small startups trying to create a space in the digital world? And then if you could share step-by-step answer to align both thoughts and energy into the direction to create your personal brand. So maybe just put it in the context of, hey, somebody's starting a tech startup, they're working towards that. What is the step-by-step things that they should do to get started?
If you're in the B2B space, thought leadership is a very effective strategy right now. It's very effective. It's more so in the B2B space than the B2C, where influencing, pays off generally more there. So if you're in the B2B space, becoming a thought leader is very important. And the company should adopt thought leadership as part of its strategy. Even if you are a startup with one person, this is generally what I recommend is the person should convey their expertise to the world, their thought leadership, which we can go over all those components in a second, but should convey thought leadership, and the company should then endorse the person. So you should be having the company promote the person promoting their knowledge. And as you start to expand and scale, this can get much bigger, much quickly, and it can start to change from you kind of going out and trying to push into clients to get business to now pulling, meaning, now I get hundreds and hundreds of messages all the time with people wanting to use me for various different reasons. So that's kind of a pull that I have now. So when it gets into the subjects that you have, this is where I would go over the thought leadership of the areas that you need to focus on in order to be seen as a thought leader. So, and these are kind of some of the things I recommend. One is your credentials. Do you have the letters behind your name, the experience, anything that goes, yes, that person knows what they're talking about? It could be a certificate. It could be number of projects that you've done. It could be your education, anything that conveys they know what they're talking about. That one most people focus on, but they never think about how to concisely define it and articulate it. The second one, which very few people focus on, is accolades, which is recognition by peers in your industry that you're good at what you do. There's a difference between knowing an answer and knowing something, going, yeah, but they're really good at it. And peers have recognized me as being good at it. There's a lot of awards out there and recognition that recognize people as being good at their field. Figure out those, apply for them, and see if you can get them. The third is network. Do you know the who's who of people out there that are making an impact in your particular space, in your subject? Fourth is industry involvement. Are you participating in the places that stuff is happening? Joining societies, associations, research groups, academic teams, whatever they are, that you're where the stuff is happening. And last is having a opinion. You can't be a thought leader if you're just regurgitating something you learned in a book or in a class, but you have to have, in my opinion, or in my prediction, or based on my thoughts and experience, and then you start to convey. So people want your opinion, not just the answer to a question. So that's a very simplified version on how you focus on a thought leader and how I recommend you start there. Go to Google and look up who are the top thought leaders, who are the top subject matter experts, who are the top influencers in your case, digital, whether it's digital in general or digital finance, digital banking, digital manufacturing. There are lists out there. Go look up those people, connect with them on LinkedIn, and then look at what associations they're doing, where are they speaking, what are they a part of? And then you can focus your efforts in the right area more effectively by knowing where who's who are out there. So that's kind of what I would recommend your starting point as a thought leader. Now, LinkedIn becomes the promotional tool to start to convey that easily and effectively to the world for your thought leadership. And the reason why I like LinkedIn over any other platform out there is, number one, you can create a profile that conveys your subject matter expertise. You can show all your projects, all your history, all your awards, all your education. No other social media platform allows you to post all of that in there. Number two is LinkedIn is the only platform that allows you to search very specifically for your target audience for who you want. In my case, it's leaders in manufacturing. So you can search and go, who are the top who are manufacturing leaders in the United States of companies over 1,000 people, in food and beverage. Like, I can search and then connect with those people. So you can refine your audience to be who you want. No other social platform allows you to do that. And so if you spend the effort to make sure that you kind of get an initial momentum going of the audience that you want to see it, and that you're reflecting your brand that you want, you're going to start to accelerate quickly, because you may have a small following to start, but the following you have is exactly who you want it to be because you took time getting that. Versus if you're just a true influencer, and let's say using TikTok or Instagram, you don't really control who follows you, and having some kids around the world in different countries may be a nice follower number, but it doesn't help you at all in your business. And so I don't focus on the numbers. You're always going to have smaller LinkedIn following and engagement, or following engagement on LinkedIn, than you will on TikTok or Instagram. But I would argue it's far more effective in terms of the people that you reach there. So
I don't know if you've had the same I don't know if you've had the same experience, but I've also seen that some of the posts that do the worst impression wise or engagement wise have led to some of the best inbound opportunities, because they can be much more specific, so specific that not everybody is going to be interested, but the people who would actually buy from you are. And so it's kind of funny because, you might have a post that gets like 5 likes, but you get 2 people who reach out and go, hey, you just spoke directly to me, and they're your buyer. And there's somebody who's never engaged with any of your content. They've never commented. They might not even be connected, but they're like, I've been seeing your post for a while, and that really spoke to me. And, I'd love to have a meeting. So I totally agree with that LinkedIn. And I mean, another killer thing about LinkedIn, which is why I also love this platform, is you can see people who have engaged with you, and you can look through and find people that you should be connected with, or that would be a good opportunity to collaborate or sell to them. And you can go to their profile and see all about them and decide, hey, would this person be a good fit? Whereas if you're on TikTok, you have a username. How in the world are you going to know whether that person is the CEO of a $30 million company? But on LinkedIn, they like it. They like your post, and you go there and you're like, this person's a perfect fit. And they just like my post. Maybe I should reach out. And then, it gives you the opportunity to really understand your B2B audience. And I just don't think you can get that. If you're selling B2B, to your point, I don't think you can get that on any other platform.
Anywhere else. I agree. Totally agree.
So, you told me before we met that like you were doing a ton of speaking engagements before you did LinkedIn. So you were really already a thought leader. You were already speaking and a sought after speaker. So maybe tell me a little bit about your journey to becoming a thought leader. I'd just say maybe like 30-second version. And then what happened when you started posting on LinkedIn, what that did to accelerate your growth.
It'll be a little longer, but it will be worth the story, because there's going to be a couple points I make. So you have to understand, when I was working at a previous company, it happened to be an OT system integrator. I came in as sales. I've been in sales the large majority of my career, at least more than the first half of it. And while I was working there, I got taken out of sales and put into operations with engineers reporting to me. How do you get engineers to look up to a sales guy as their manager to be respected and guide them on what to do? That was when I chose to make thought leadership my strategy. I didn't want to duplicate what they knew. I wanted to complement what they knew. And so I focused on what the customers would want to hear about. And that's where I learned statistics and trends and industry insights and all the stuff that then my team that worked for me respected and go, I don't know that stuff. So now they immediately saw value in me without going, yeah, but you don't know the engineering as well as I do. I wasn't trying to duplicate them. So that was why I chose thought leadership as my strategy, is because of a a job change, if you want to call it. Now, at the time, I was an industrial safety expert. So yes, I spoke many, many, many times. I won awards. I have them up on my shelf as Safety Professional of the Year, National Rising Stars in Safety Award, National Safety Council Awards. Like, I won all these awards in safety. What I didn't focus on was the promotion of it. So I was known amongst a small group and sought after, but I wasn't, well known, I would say. It was the pandemic that drove me to switch to pushing it digitally, and that completely transformed. Now, coincidentally, while I did the digital push in 2021, just a few years earlier, I was assigned a new subject, Industry 4.0, at the end of 2018. Before then, I'd never heard of it. I had no idea what it was. If you were to ask me, I would have been like, firmware update? Like, I had no clue what Industry 4.0 is. So when I coach people on this, I say, I started with a subject that I had never heard of. So I wasn't the expert on it, and I didn't know what I was doing on LinkedIn. And now in 3.5 years, I've been recognized as one of the top thought leaders, top influencers on the subject. And so what I help guide people on is, how did I do that, and what did I learn for it? And if you actually just scroll back after my 800 plus posts, what's one of my first posts I had? What is Industry 4.0? Because I didn't know. And so I thought, well, if I don't know this, other people probably don't know it. And I'm going to share my learning experience along the way of what I'm learning on these subjects. Remember those 3 things that I said about your personal brand: your knowledge, your skills, and your personality. I didn't say they have to be the things that you know very well or the things that you're very good at. It's the things you want to be perceived at knowing and perceived as being good at. So I picked Industry 4.0 as my subject before I knew it. And yes, I read books. I took classes. I did everything to submerge myself. And I would say I know it pretty well many years later. But I went through the journey of making posts about all the learnings I had, because my approach was, boy, if I don't know this, I bet you there are others that don't know this out there. And that's kind of what started my journey in terms of what I actually posted about that matched the brand that I wanted portrayed.
Yeah, I can second that, from my own experience, but actually I've been convincing my brother, who's in sales for a couple of years now, to be more active on LinkedIn, and then specifically to start a live show and do kind of like what we're doing now. And a year ago, he started interviewing people who are subject matter experts in drone detection and in drone, mitigating drones, which is kind of his business area. And after a year, people are starting to recognize him as being a leader in that space. And he's only been in it for a year. And I mean, as far as like true expertise, he's just learning, but he's being a catalyst to kind of bring together other subject matter experts to share on the topic. And in less than a year, he's being asked to speak on panels where all of his ideal customers are coming as guests. And he's being positioned as a panelist, as an expert. And, he's being asked to speak about drones and drone mitigation. He's talking to legislators. In less than a year, he's being seen as an expert, not because he's saying he's an expert, but because he's starting to bring these ideas together and bring other people in. And to your point, he's just saying, hey, if I have the question, I'm going to ask those questions to the true experts. And just by having them on and asking those questions, he's being perceived as an expert. And it's amazing when you just even have somebody, when you interview somebody, you get credibility by association with that person. And it's kind of like maybe it shouldn't be that way. And maybe people shouldn't do that, but it kind of is a trick of human psychology, I think, where when you're seen with somebody else, you kind of get their expertise rubs off on you from a perception standpoint.
I do it very well as part of it. And yes, and that's why that network component is a big one. Do you know all the people out there that are on it? Now, 2 subtle things I'll note. I never actually say I'm an Industry 4.0 expert on anything. I say enthusiast because I really enjoy the subject. The world can decide if I'm an expert or not. I won't ever claim ever that I'm an Industry 4.0 expert on my own right. Now, the other part is your brand is making sure that you convey what I'm just going to call an expert actually on, because for me is a good example. No one calls me up for IT infrastructure, even though that could fall under the umbrella of Industry 4.0, because I'm not advertising that I know that. I'm not advertising as I'm the technical guy who will come do your infrastructure review, or, that's not what I am. I've become, someone that knows his stats and trends in the industry, knows all the common best practices out there and industry insights. So I became someone in a short amount of time that I now know some knowledge that very few people know. And if you have that, then people will be attracted to you because they know the answers to that. And it doesn't have to be that, yes, you have a 30-year history in knowing this thing just to have knowledge that you can share that people want. In my case, stats and trends is a big thing that people want. They want to know how they compare to other companies. I narrowed down and focused on that, and I was able to provide value quickly to my audience as part of my thought leadership.
So Jeff, I said 20 to 30 minutes, but we're at the 30-minute mark, and we've got hovering between like 45 and 55 people that are jumping in live, which is a pretty decent amount of people like you. They like hearing from you because this is so far my most attended live. So I want to, real quick, we'll go for a couple extra minutes. If you guys have questions for Jeff, please put them in there. And we did get a really solid question I'm going to bring up here on the screen. But yeah, if you're listening in, you have a really specific question, please put it out there and I'll pull it up. So Sean Lovett posted, is it better to have people following you as an individual on your personal account or your business if you're a startup business of one?
Ooh, good question. I don't know that I would put it either or. I would say it should be both, and you should have different brands. You want you as a person to be known, why to call you, all right, what you know, what you're good at, and your personality, and you want a separate brand for your company, and they should be related to each other. Even if you're a person of one, you're making the post for yourself, you're making the post for your company, but you want them to be perceived as separate, because as you grow, you will be a company of two, then 3, and then 5, and then 10. And you want your company brand to be different than your particular brand. Now, they're going to be maybe similar to start, but they should build off each other. Once again, the general strategy I recommend is have the people show what they know, and have the company show the people. And this could even include a product launch that you have. I
like that. That's a good breakdown.
Have the person release the product and talk about it, because then you're associating whether they're the developer of it, the maker, like their affiliation with the product, and have the company promote, hey, look what Jeff just created. And so now you're tying in the personal aspect to the company. If you look at some of the biggest companies out there, they actually have a brand personality. And so you want your company to develop that personality, like I said, over time. So you should be doing both. You should be, your company should be sharing your posts, making its own post. You should be commenting on your company's post, so that you do start to develop that brand over time, because you're company 1 now, but hopefully you'll grow to 2 quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. And so that kind of brings up another question, and we have a couple more questions here. So we'll keep going with some of the other questions in a second. But that kind of brings up a thought that, or a question that I hear a lot of times when I'm talking about, hey, empower your employees. You're a great example of that. Like as an employer, you could take Jeff Winter, who's getting all of this attention, and you could go, hey, wait a minute, you're not promoting our company enough. How is this benefiting us? You're spending your time on this, whatever. And they get really weird about it. Or an employee starts posting about their expertise, and suddenly the company's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not exactly in line with, our brand guidelines or whatever. And you can really easily shut employees down. And I'm kind of like, well, hold on a second. Like, this person's going to be giving you free press. They're going to be building rapport for you. Like that doesn't make sense. You should be empowering your employees. And I totally agree with you on that point of the company can be highlighting the experts on the team. But what do you say when a company then comes back and goes, but what happens if that person leaves? We've been promoting them this whole time. How do you respond to that?
I mean, I don't know that it's that different than just having a great employee. Like, what if we spend all this money training this employee and then they leave? Whatever the investment that they put into it, I mean, there's a risk if you don't keep them. That's something that could happen out there. I do firmly believe and have a lot of statistics that can show even an employee who never once mentions their company's name can still drive an incredible amount of traffic back to that organization. Because once again, people want to follow the people. And as long as what they're talking about is relatable to what the company does, which should be the case if that's what the employee is doing working for that company, it will generate traffic to the organization. I have statistics that show that the company LinkedIn page went up. The engagement in webinar attendance and white paper downloads went up dramatically. The amount of marketing qualified leads went dramatically up. And it just like showed that this generated more benefit and revenue for the company, for more than one company. I've actually been able to show that too. So it absolutely is worth it. And even if they do leave, it still doesn't change what they did as an employee, and their time there was worth the money and effort that went into it. But I mean, big people in the industry change, I don't want to say regularly, but they change frequently enough that it's not seen as that big of a deal. I mean, if you look at influencers 20 times more influential than me, I've seen them switch companies and do stuff differently as a part of it. And the company still has benefited from that. Because if you check out my LinkedIn page example, you're going to see all my previous companies. And even if one person clicks on one previous company, benefits the company for free. And right now I'm averaging, hundreds of thousands of profiles of views a year.
Yeah. And my response to that overarching idea is, okay, if you're afraid that person's going to leave, why not get them to share what they're doing with other people on your team? And if you have one person on your team who's getting that kind of attention and they're really growing their personal brand and they leave, that could have a big impact. Although you're still better off to hitch your boat to theirs for as long as they're going to be there. So even if they are there and they leave, you're going to be better off for having empowered them, and they'll probably be much more likely to stay longer. But then on the flip side, what if you had 5 or 10 or 20 employees on your team who all start building a personal brand, and then one of them leaves? You're not even going to notice, right? But you've empowered your entire team and you've helped them all grow as experts. They've grown in their relationships, and they're going to, by default, bring in better quality employees into your company because people want to work with people like Jeff, and you get that value.
I was just going to compliment that and say, being a thought leader is different than a thought leadership strategy as an organization. Even if you only have 5 employees and that's it, and all 5 of them become thought leaders, which they probably should if you're a small company, at least perceived as thought leaders, out there, then you're right. It puts less burden on one person being the name and face of the organization, and more, I like this company because look at the people that they have. I like what they represent and who they are, and they have the expertise and everything that I'm looking for. So absolutely, it can and should be the place that if you have a thought leader, build thought leadership into your company's approach, enable, encourage, and support them, and a mechanism to grow more thought leaders. So now you become known as the thought leadership company rather than having one person.
Yeah, and this gets more into culture and that, to go too much further on this topic. But another thing is, if that person who was on your team felt like you supported them, you cared about them as a person, you empowered them to run their personal brand, and they got a better job because of it, and you're excited for them and you champion them on, what happens when that person then has people come to them and say, hey, who should I work with for XYZ? They're going to still be sending people to you and referring people to you. Whereas if you try to throttle that person and you hold them back in their career, you're not going to have that same experience. So if you're churning out thought leaders who are consistently getting so good that they get hired into other places, you're going to have a referral network that's going to be nuts. But you're not going to get that if you hold people back. So we got another question coming in here. I sometimes find that sharing personal stories resonates with people, even if they're not always 100% business focused. Is this a good way to build your personal brand?
Great question. I have stats on that in my document that show that my personal posts generate the highest amount of traffic of all my posts statistically on average. So they generate more than my business posts. But my rule of 80% being what I'm going to call my subjects and 20% being my personal helps kind of round it out overall. Because even though the engagement is higher on my personal posts, they're not the ones that increase my following. When I make, my Batmobile post, something like that, my following doesn't go up a lot, even though I will get a tremendous amount of views for that. My following goes up when I post something very informational where, remember, you want someone to not necessarily just I'm going to call it love, because I don't want to use the word like because that's a button, but love your post. You want them to love you and go, I want to know what Jeff's next post is going to be. I want to follow him. That's more important than this post was great. And then who is this guy who created it? I forgot. You want people to go, I love Jeff and I want to see his next stuff. So you should have personal aspects, but if you actually pay attention to mine as an example, with very few exceptions, they all relate back to the brand that I want and the subjects I want to be known for. Even when I post my family picture in Disney World, I talk about the technological advancements that Disney World put into their rides. So I took a family photo and announcement and related it back to the things I want to be known for. And I do that frequently. Same thing I did when I went to Dubai and talked about Burj Khalifa as one of my personal posts. I related it back. So you may not even notice that as a subtlety, but it's very intentional for the brand that I want. Very rarely do I ever just post something that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that I'm doing, because then I would argue that's not something you should post about. If it's going to conflict with or take in a different direction, it's not supporting your brand, it's distracting your brand.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts that are spinning around in my head after that, because I would say that another thing from those personal posts, like I'm just thinking in particular posts that you've done. I've seen a ton of your posts about Industry 4.0 and they're super interesting and you do these great graphical breakdowns, but I can't think of none of those stick out to me in any way. Like they're informational and they're helpful, but they're not necessarily memorable in the same way that your Titanic post or your Batmobile posts are, right? So I think they both, kind of to your point, have value where you want people to see those informational posts because that's where they're going to go, oh man, this guy knows what he's talking about. But if you never do anything that makes you stand out, they're not going to remember you. Because even another thing is if people can't remember your name, but they love all the stuff that you've done, but they can't remember your name, they're not going to know how to find you when they need that post, or when they're thinking, oh, I need an Industry 4.0 strategy. I remember seeing this guy. I know I follow him. It's been great, but they can't remember your face. They can't remember your name. They're never going to find you. So I think some of those memorable personal posts do that. And I would also say that posts about that I posted about my family or things that are going on with my family that aren't, I'm not saying like super crazy personal, but things that are more family oriented, that's helped people to trust me in a different way. And like, I want to be known as somebody who is valuing my family in the way that I work, and that I'm prioritizing being able to spend time with them and things like that. So that's kind of part of my personal brand, and it's attracting people who are similar and think similar. And those are the kinds of clients I want to work with. So even in posting something that's showing my family and me doing something with my family that's prioritizing that, it's helped to attract the right kind of people. So there is intention behind a post like that, even though it might seem slightly unrelated to selling through social or personal branding or, starting a podcast or whatever.
Strategy. And one thing I might add is when you look at the personal side, that a lot of people jump to, I don't want to share my hobbies or stuff about my family. Then don't. It doesn't need to be about your personal life to be a personal post. Sharing that you took a new class and what you learned from that class is purely personal. So that's an example, an achievement you won, as something that you like. You can have it be about you at a personal level, vulnerability about you that doesn't have to be, well, I don't want to show like I said, my hobbies or pictures of my kids or anything like that. Then don't. You don't need to do that. You just need to make sure that people get to know you as a person the way you want people to know you as a person.
Yeah, and I'll tag on one thing on that because I found it really interesting. As far as the more that I've had sales conversation and have been in more sales-oriented roles, the interesting thing is if I get on a call with somebody and I start off that call going, hey, let's talk about how you can launch a show that's going to help you build relationships with the right people. Maybe that'll go well, maybe it won't. But it's usually a little bit colder, a little bit more transactional if I started out that way. And if what I'm doing is great and they need it, maybe we'll move forward. But if I start out that same call by going, hey, how was your weekend? That's going to be such a better call, right? Or I noticed something in your background. It's not that easy, right? But, you see somebody, like if you were to get on a call with me and you go, oh man, those look like things from Africa. It seems like there's a story behind that. I'm going to start telling you about, hey, yeah, I've been to Kenya 8 times and my wife and I run an organization there. And you're going to learn all these things about me. And if you do that and you use it to try to gain advantage over that other person, for one, that's unethical and not great, but they're going to perceive that also. But if you genuinely have interest in the person on the other side and you engage in that personal aspect, they're going to be way more likely to want to work with you and to find a way to work with you. So I would say the personal things, by posting those on LinkedIn, you're giving people that personal connection. And then when they get on a one-on-one call with you, they're going to already feel like they know you. And the first thing they say, like I've had this happen a lot. I had in my profile for a while this Easter egg at the very bottom. It said, hey, if you use the code word chickens, I'll jump on a call with you, even if it's just a straight demo. And I had people reference that. They'd be like, oh, I don't have anything to sell you but chickens, and then we'd jump on a call and they'd just be like, man, I've been loving your content and whatever. But they would reference these things that were on the personal side that stuck out to them. So I just want to throw that out there.
I agree with it. Yeah.
Well, cool, Jeff. We've been going now for 45 minutes. We've kept people on this whole time, which is great. But I just want to wrap up here with practical steps. So somebody's listening to this, they're getting ready to take their personal brand and thought leadership to the next level. Let's just assume on LinkedIn, they're going to start diving into this. What are 2 or 3 practical steps that they could implement over the next week to help kickstart their personal brand building on LinkedIn?
Got a simple answer for that. Number 1, update your profile. Make sure it conveys the brand that I just went over, your knowledge, your skills, and your personality traits that you want. If you're in sales, an example, and selling is one of your skills, then show how you hit your number is an example. If you want sales to be one of your knowledge, talk about how you know sales management and how you know sales processes. Make sure it conveys what you want. Don't just duplicate your resume. Make sure it conveys the brand that you want. And it's okay if it changes over time. I update my profile every so often because I want my brand to shift a little bit. So update your profile is 1. Number 2, you need to be consistently active on LinkedIn. And for my beginners, I generally recommend start 10 to 15 minutes every day, not an hour a week, which is roughly the same amount of time, 10 to 15 minutes every day. Because if you do an hour one day and then don't log on for 5 days, you miss most of the benefit and value. You're never going to really take off unless you get in the habit of doing this every day. And when you log in for those 15 minutes, be very efficient and effective with what you're doing. Send connection requests, comment on a few people's posts, respond to your messages, and at least 2 to 3 times a week, make a post. Doesn't have to be a unique post. Share an HBR article, a Forbes article, an article that you like for someone, and add your opinion or thought to it. You need to get in the habit of regularly doing that, because when I coach people on it, I don't even start to review their posts until I've seen they've done 20 or 30 of them to get in the habit. And also any social media out there, they don't reward one-time posters. You need to be in the algorithm. They reward the 100th post, or some number later, not the first one. So by the time you have something that's important to announce, it's too late if you're not in the algorithm. So start today just posting anything. But I don't want you to spend more than 5 minutes on that post to start. You just need to get in the habit of doing it.
Yeah, one thing I would say is an easy post. Well, there's 2 things I've seen be really effective. One is what I call the screen share method, and shoot me a message if you want a breakdown of exactly how to do this. But you can get a tool like Descript and go to an HBR article or whatever article, highlight a couple points, and then just record a 3-minute video talking through those points and saying, here's why this is important to you. You don't have to be a thought leader. You don't have to come up with anything. You're just reading it and you're giving your opinion on what people need to think. It's really easy to do. The first time it'll probably take you an hour, but once you get used to it, it'll take you like 10 or 15 minutes. And you've got a great video post where you're being a catalyst for other people's ideas. And what I found comes from that is tag the author in it and say, hey, thanks for writing this. And they might respond back and you could have them on a show or interview them and get access to that person, which is super cool. But number 2 would be just ask a question. Your posts don't always have to be something where you're knowledgeable. Some of the posts that I've seen for myself go the furthest are asking people a question. So a 5-minute post could be just find something that people are really opinionated about and say, hey, would you do this or that? Would you use HubSpot or sales? Super effective. Okay, so Jeff, how can people find more about you and any parting thoughts that you want to leave people with?
Well, if you didn't gather it by now, I don't know what to tell you. But LinkedIn is by far the best way to contact me, stay aware of what's kind of going on in my world. And Joseph already shared the document, but I have this document on there that is, free for anyone that wants to learn more. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jeff, for jumping on. Really appreciate it. And highly recommend following Jeff. He's awesome.
Thanks.
We'll see you guys next time.